Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lost in the Reel. Today, I am so excited to be ranking all 13 new release films that I saw in April 2022. Now, this was an interesting month for movies. We saw a slew of animated films come out, along with a couple of real stinkers from Netflix. We also saw the release of some films that premiered all the way back in January of last year at Sundance. And we finally saw the return of audiences to cinemas. It finally feels like business is booming again. So it has been an exciting month for movies, but also a little bit of a mixed bag in quality. So without further ado, my friends, let's get started. So before we get started, if you haven't seen one of my ranking videos before, I place each and every one of these movies on a tier. Now these categories start with masterpiece all the way to amazing, very good, just okay, meh, very bad, and then the worst of the worst. At the very end of the video, I'll move all of the films around so we have a very clear top 3 of the month and then a bottom 3 as well. And I'm going to talk about each one of these films in the order in which they were released. So let's get started with Apollo 10½. So here we have Richard Linklater finally returning to his rotoscoping roots. Now this is a medium that he used all the way back in Waking Life and A Scanner Darkly. But those films were super hard R-rated animated films, whereas this Netflix movie is much more geared towards all ages, which I loved. And it's all about this kid who is recruited by NASA to kind of do this pre-trial of the moon landing in the 60s. But more so, it's just about a man reminiscing about his childhood in 1960s Texas suburbia. This is definitely more, it's not really a straightforward narrative, but just a series of vignettes that are weaved together to kind of create a story. And a lot of people are going to be turned off by that because there's not a lot of talking and there's a lot of narration done by Jack Black. But I just found it to be such a deeply personal story, yet again, from Richard Linklater. This guy has given us the Before trilogy with Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy, and of course Boyhood, which was nominated for Best Picture. His movies are just so deeply felt, and might be crazy to say, but Apollo 10½, even though it's animated, feels like probably his most personal film to date. I absolutely loved it. I love this director. I cannot get enough of him. And I would love to see him continue this rotoscoping journey about stories of, him growing up. So maybe another story with this kid, but as a more of a teenager rather than a child. So I would love to see that. I think the fantasy framework about him going up to the moon didn't really work for me. I know it worked for a lot of people, but besides that, I absolutely love this film. And if you haven't checked it out yet, please do. So Apollo 10½, A Space Age Childhood, goes in the amazing tier. Next up, we have another new Netflix original movie called The Bubble, which came out on the same day as Apollo 10½. And spoiler alert, it is not nearly as good. This is written and directed by Judd Apatow, who's given us some great comedies in the past with The 40-Year-Old Virgin, Knocked Up, and most recently, The King of Staten Island with Pete Davidson, which personally I loved. This is all about a group of actors who are part of this big blockbuster franchise, and they are attempting to film a movie in their franchise during the pandemic, and they're all cooped up in this hotel during the filming process of it all. One thing I think is kind of funny as a side note, this month was full of movies about the behind the scenes of movies. And usually I love this type of thing. So with the talent involved, this should have been a slam dunk. but it's not at all. And Judd Apatow is known for really infusing heart and depth and character development and drama into his comedies, and I think that's what makes them so special. This movie lacks any of the heart or the depth or the character development or the drama, and it just goes for broad comedy. And it is not funny at all. There was a few times where I chuckled, but it's just so out there. And this is not Judd Apatow's wheelhouse. So unfortunately, it failed, not just because it's a terrible comedy, but also the characters in this film, who are performed by incredible actors like Pedro Pascal, who we're going to talk about in a little bit, Keegan-Michael Key, Leslie Mann, David Duchovny, Karen Gillan. So we have this incredible cast, but then we have this cast of characters who are all caricatures and are just so unlikable and foul almost that I didn't care for their plight. So we have comedy that doesn't work, a cast of characters who you don't care for, and then you have a movie that balloons to like 2.5 hours or something crazy like that. This movie was just a real travesty, unfortunately. I really think Judd Apatow needs to go back to his roots and, really stick with what he knows. And this was not it. So The Bubble goes in the very bad tier. Very, very bad. Not worth watching. Then we have the South Korean serial killer thriller Midnight, which stars one of the stars of Squid Game, Lee Ha-joon. And this is all about a serial killer who is hunting down this deaf woman and her mother because they've witnessed him in the act of trying to kill another person. This is a very scaled back, bare bones thriller, which to me is super refreshing. It didn't try to add any crazy bells and whistles or plot twists. It's very basic, but in the best way possible. I was literally on the edge of my seat for the entire runtime, and there's all of these scenes of them running through the streets of Seoul, and it's so adrenaline pumping the way these scenes are filmed. It's like a high-speed car chase, but they're literally just running on foot. So it's beautifully filmed. The score is fantastic. There are some few plot contrivances that I had issues with that kind of seemed a little illogical. And as sadistic as this sounds, I almost wanted to see the serial killer have more of a body count and to see more of his terrible deeds, because then the fear of this character would have been more palpable. But besides those things, I think this is a perfect little thriller. It will pass the time quickly. It's not as great as some of the South Korean classics like Old Boy or Sympathy for Lady Vengeance. But if you love this genre, then you're gonna love this movie. So Midnight goes in the very good tier for me. Next up is Michael Bay's Ambulance, starring Jake Gyllenhaal, Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, and Isa Gonzalez. So Michael Bay finally decided to take a break from the Transformers franchise, thank God, to direct this action movie. And even though this is not an original action film, it is based upon a foreign film, it's just nice to see Michael Bay do something different with his life and move on from the Transformers. We don't need any more of that shit. So this film is about Jake Gyllenhaal and Yahya Abdul-Mateen II's character, who are brothers. And Yahya has moved on from the life of crime and has a wife, an infant child, was in the military, but he needs some money for a medical, some kind of state-of-the-art medical surgery. So he meets back up with his brother, who he is now estranged with, and they plan a heist, and the heist goes terribly wrong. They hijack an ambulance, they almost murder a cop, and they are trying to keep the cop alive inside the ambulance during a high-speed car chase with police chasing them. So it's basically like Speed with Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock, but in an ambulance. So this movie is stupid and way too long and kind of forgettable, honestly. But I was so in the mood for some mindless popcorn entertainment. So when I turned it on, honestly, I ended up having a blast with this movie. Like I said, it is not perfect by any means, but there's just some things that actually kind of step it up a couple of notches for me. Number one being Jake Gyllenhaal's unhinged performance. This character he is playing is so weaselly and smarmy and nasty, but you just can't take your eyes off of him. And he has some ridiculous one-liners, like one about herpes. I just like they're absolutely meme-worthy. So he was just so much fun to watch. Isaac Gonzalez and Yahya Abdul-Mateen II were also quite good. They definitely elevate the material. I don't know. There's just something so nice about getting a non-franchise, practical effects driven B-movie action thriller. We used to get these movies all of the time in the 90s. They were a dime a dozen, and now we very rarely get them. So to see a movie like this, it's just refreshing, and I had so much fun with it. And I'd like to see more of them, but this movie bombed at the box office. So, I think that's going to deter directors from making these types of movies, which is a real shame. But if you like this genre, I don't think there's any way that you're not going to have fun with it. But it's definitely not anything to write home about either. So I'm going to say Ambulance is just okay. Then we have Everything, Everywhere, All at Once from A24. This is written and directed by Daniels, who are a directing duo who directed this really strange little movie called Swiss Army Man with Daniel Radcliffe and Paul Dano a couple of years back. So if you've seen this movie, you kind of know their strangeness. And this movie takes strange to a whole new level. I'm not even going to get into the plot of this thing because I would just convolute it. But basically, what people are calling it is the non-Marvel multiverse movie. It stars Michelle Yeoh and also Stephanie Sue and Short Round himself from Indiana Jones and the Goonies, Ke Huy Quan, who took a 30-year break from making movies to come back and film this one. And I'm so happy that he did. Where do I get started on this movie? I love Everything Everywhere All at Once to such a high degree, and I'm going to need to see it again for a third time before I definitively say this. But I think this could possibly be in my top 50 films of all time. That's how much I love it. It's definitely my favorite film of the year so far. But what the Daniels are able to accomplish here is unlike anything I've ever seen in cinema itself before. Just the sheer craft on display in this film, everything is awards worthy, from the incredible costume design to the cinematography to the visual effects. You think about these big blockbuster movies that Marvel's making, and then the visual effects that were pulled off in this film at such a minuscule budget, it's just extraordinary. To the score, and then to this trio of actors. We have Michelle Yeoh, who was in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and also Crazy Rich Asians. She has never been better. This performance, not only is she doing martial arts, but she's doing broad comedy, heartfelt drama. Literally everything you could want in a performance is in this one. So she deserves the Academy Award. I'm telling you right now, if she does not get nominated, I will have a field day. But then also the other two actors, we have Stephanie Sue and Ke Huy Quan. I think that they're just as good as Michelle Yeoh, and their performances are just as awards worthy, because you can't have one of these characters without the other. They create this cohesive, authentic family unit, and you feel for their struggles, and you are just on this journey of self-discovery with them through all of this chaos and insanity. And what the Daniels are able to do so well is bring all of this craziness with some really out there humor. They're able to bring it full circle and give us something extremely meaningful that anybody who watches is going to get something out of. I just think this movie is one of a kind, and it's something really special. And I read something the other day about Film Twitter is going to start calling this movie overrated. I hope Film Twitter shuts the hell up and lets this movie be, because this movie is something really, truly special. And I hope you all, once you hear this, if you haven't seen it yet, go to theaters to watch Everything Everywhere All at Once. I want to finish with this. This is what I wrote on my Letterboxd. And you probably won't understand this if you haven't seen it yet, but I will never look at Everything Bagels or Googly Eyes or raccoons or hot dogs or job appreciation trophies or rocks the same again. And I thank Everything Everywhere All at Once for that. This is an absolute masterpiece. So that answers the question of what is Everything Everywhere All at Once? It is a masterpiece. So the next one is a little bit of a conundrum for me, because I saw We're All Going to the World's Fair at the very beginning of last year at the Sundance Film Festival. It's finally getting a wide release, but I hated it when I first saw it. And then all of a sudden reviews started coming out for it because it's finally getting its wide release and people are loving this movie. So I thought maybe I wasn't in the right mood. Let's watch it again. Well, I hated it again. So I don't know what I'm missing here. But this is a movie about a isolated young girl who is stuck up in her attic, and she is dealing with loneliness and depression and all of these mental health issues, and she starts this online horror role-playing game. And she just gets sucked into it and weird things start happening. This movie is so boring and monotonous, and it just goes on, and it's not even 90 minutes. I just didn't get anything out of it. So basically what people are saying is that this is not a movie about plot or about storyline or narrative. This is a movie that makes you feel something. It gives you this vibe, and it has important messages about isolation and depression and mental health in this era of the internet. I get that, but I don't get that from this movie. Literally, the only feeling I get from this movie is utter boredom. And I'm interested to hear more from other people who love this movie, because some people are saying this is the best film of the year. I don't understand it. I never will. This movie makes me feel icky. It makes me want to go to bed, curled up in a fetal position. I hate this movie. So I'd love to have more conversations about it, and maybe watch it again for a third time and try to fall for it. I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen. I think We're All Going to the World's Fair is one of the worst movies I've seen this year or last year. Please, I dare you, try to change my opinion. So yes, We're All Going to the World's Fair is worst of the worst. I hate this movie. Then we have Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore. So, I really loved the first film in this franchise. I thought it was honestly better than a couple of the original Harry Potter films. I had a lot of fun with it. And then Crimes of Grindelwald came out, and that movie sucked. And then we have this movie. What I will say is that this movie is better than Crimes of Grindelwald, but I don't think it's saved this franchise by any means. And I hate to say this, but I really hate to say this, but I don't know if I have any desire for this Fantastic Beasts franchise to continue. I almost want to see them scrap it and just start fresh with like an HBO Max Hogwarts Harry Potter Wizarding World series or something like that. I'm not feeling it. There are a couple of really great set pieces in this movie, like Theseus's prison break. I loved that scene. It felt like there was some fun injected into that scene, and a couple of others. But the real problem here is that there is just that feeling of magic is absent from these last two films, and that's what you go to see a Wizarding World movie for. You go for the magic, and it's missing. So I enjoyed this movie a little bit more. Like I said, I think that if they do continue, I will go see the next one, just crossing my fingers that it'll be good. But with the box office receipts, I just don't see this continuing, and I just don't know if I care. So that leads me to the Fantastic Beasts Secrets of Dumbledore being a meh from me. A big old meh. Next up is another Netflix original piece of poop, film, called Choose or Die. This movie is about a broke college dropout who needs some cash, so she plays this 80s survivalist video game, and it curses her. This movie, I don't know. Some people ended up liking it. I hate this movie pretty much. I think it's uninspired. It's ugly. It's only made up of 4 levels, which to me, it's like each level is a set piece, and you only give us 4 levels, and then you get a boss level at the end. It just seemed so half-assed to me, basically. So I'm not going to talk a lot about this. I have a review up on my channel for it. But Choose or Die, I would say choose this movie and die because this movie sucks. So don't waste your time. Choose or Die is very bad. Next up, we have the Netflix original documentary White Hot: The Rise and Fall of Abercrombie & Fitch. I will read the logline to you guys. Selling exclusivity comes at a price. All the cool kids were wearing it. This documentary explores A&F's pop culture reign in the late 90s and early 2000s and how it thrived on exclusion. So I was interested in watching this documentary because of the nostalgia A&F brings to me, because I personally, as a kid in junior high and coupled the first year of high school or so, I wanted to be that Abercrombie & Fitch boy. And I remember seeing those super sexy advertisements being like, I want to be that. And I remember, walking into Abercrombie & Fitch, the store, and being hit by that potent, overbearing, nasty cologne and that overly loud music. And I don't know why anyone ever wanted to walk into that store. It was an awful experience, but it gave me a lot of nostalgia. So I was interested in watching this documentary because there was a point in time where I remember, even though I had long stopped wearing Abercrombie & Fitch or caring about the brand, I remember all of a sudden, I just remember people just stopped wearing it altogether. So I was interested to see kind of the rise and fall of this company. Now, I think the idea for this documentary was a sound one, but I don't think it hit its potential at all. I think this would have worked as a limited series because there's a lot of points that are touched upon that are super intriguing, but then it kind of just throws them to the wayside. So I think this would have been a really great limited series for Netflix. But as a 87-minute movie, I just don't think it hit all the right notes. I still think it's worth a watch, I guess. It's very angering to see the blatant racism that these corporations are able to get away with. So it might piss you off for a good reason. And it is a bit of a call to arms, so I appreciate that. But it just didn't work all the way for me. So I will say White Hot is worth a watch, but it's just okay. Then we have The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, starring Nicolas Cage as Nicolas Cage. I was really excited for this movie. I love Nicolas Cage, and I have really enjoyed seeing his resurgence in movies like Mandy and Color Out of Space, and especially last year's Pig. I think he's a great actor. I think he's also really funny to make fun of. So I love the idea of taking this Nicolas Cage persona and making light of it and being cheeky about how ridiculous he is. So this movie is all about creatively and unfulfilled in facing financial ruin. Nick Cage must accept a $1 million offer to attend the birthday of a dangerous superfan. Things take a wildly unexpected turn when Cage is recruited by the CIA and forced to live up to his own legend, channeling his most iconic and beloved on-screen characters in order to save himself and his loved ones. So I actually had really high expectations for this because coming out of its premiere at South by Southwest, it got incredible reviews. And I had already been looking forward to it before that, so maybe my expectations were a little bit too high, but I still really enjoyed this movie. I had an absolute blast with it. I think its spy thriller action elements are kind of lacking, and the writing is a little bit of a mess, as is the editing, because there's sometimes when it feels like it's jumping forward into time or, kind of glazing over really important plot points. So that was kind of frustrating to me. And also there's a lot of really funny meta moments in this film, obviously from the plot itself. But I wish that they had just gone there with the meta-ness and the strangeness, because it kind of does, and then it kind of reins it in. I wish they had just gone for it. But what makes The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent 100% worth seeing is the chemistry between Nicolas Cage and Pedro Pascal. These two, it's like they've been friends their whole entire life. I don't know if they even knew each other before filming, but their chemistry is just electric. They are one of the best on-screen dynamic duos that I can think of in film history. I would literally pay to see 10 more movies with these two guys in it. It doesn't even need to be a sequel to this movie. I just want to see more movies with these two actors in it together. They're so good. They're so funny together. So that's what makes this movie worth seeing. And also the supporting cast is great. We have Tiffany Haddish, Neil Patrick Harris, and Sharon Horgan, who I love. I thought she was going to have this kind of throwaway role. She actually gets a pretty substantial role in this film, so I was very pleasantly surprised by that. So there's a lot to love about this movie. I laughed out loud throughout. It's just a whole lot of fun. So definitely go see this one. The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent is very good. Then we have DreamWorks Animation's The Bad Guys, which was just at the top of the box office last week. So let's read the logline. When the infamous bad guys are finally caught after years of countless heists and being the world's most wanted villains, Mr. Wolf brokers a deal to save them all from prison. So DreamWorks Animation, they started off so strong with franchises like Kung Fu Panda and Madagascar and How to Train Your Dragon and Shrek, and even with traditionally animated films like The Road to El Dorado and Prince of Egypt. They started off so strong in the early 2000s, and then they hit a huge nosedive, and they've just, to me at least, created forgettable stinker after stinker. So I just didn't have a lot of hope for The Bad Guys. And this movie was a huge surprise for me. Starting off with the animation, which is just such a breath of fresh air. Not just because it's beautiful to look at, but because it feels like DreamWorks is trying something new, finally for the first time in years. And they're experimenting with their animation style, which is kind of like a mix of 2D and 3D animation. And Sony Pictures Animation has recently been doing this with Into the Spider-Verse and Mitchell's versus the Machines. They stopped doing what was the norm and decided, let's try something different with our style. And it's really worked out for them, and it's working for DreamWorks Animation. Finally, it finally feels like they're trying. So that was really great to see. And also the voice cast in the bad guys. We have Sam Rockwell, we have Richard Ayoade, Aquafina, Anthony Ramos, Zazie Beetz, and Mark Maron. This voice cast is all stellar, and they really bring these characters to life. And last but not least, the characters. The story in the film is kind of basic, but the characters are what makes this film. I loved their camaraderie together. You really got why they were friends. It feels like they have this history with each other. And honestly, I would love to see DreamWorks make this a franchise and to see these characters again, because I loved the bad guys so much. It did bump down a couple of notches for me because the story is so predictable. I saw every story beat coming from a mile away, but everything else that I talked about, the animation and the characters and the voice acting, really elevated it. So this is a really special, really nice surprise from DreamWorks Animation. So I'm gonna say The Bad Guys is, I'm gonna say it's very good. Hopefully they continue this franchise and there's some amazing or even masterpiece movies in there. But for now, this first one is very good, close to amazing though. We then have the coming-of-age tale, Marvelous and the Black Hole, which also premiered last year at Sundance. I didn't get to see it last year, unfortunately. I did just see it a couple of days ago, but this was a real treat. It is about a teenage delinquent who befriends a surly magician who helps her navigate her inner demons and dysfunctional family with sleight of hand magic. Speaking of slight, I do think this movie is a little bit slight because of its runtime. It's under 90 minutes, and I do appreciate a movie that, you know, can pack a punch in a short period of time and get the job done. But I think for this film, it really deserved another 20 to 30 minutes to really flesh out all of its storylines and to be more of an impactful experience. But besides that, I think this is such a sweet little movie. It's never overly sappy or saccharine either. It really gets the tone right. It reminds me a lot of the movie Matilda, which is one of my favorite family films of all time. Not just because it stars Ray Perlman, Danny DeVito's wife, who is just incredible in this, but because it captures the inner turmoil and angst of a young child growing up. Kind of that darkness, but also that magic of growing up too. It really captures both of those things in such a beautiful way. I will say that this movie is even darker than Matilda, and I don't know if it's gonna find an audience because it's a little bit too whimsical for adults, you could say, and also just a little bit too heavy for young children. So it might have difficulty finding an audience. But if you are an adult who is also a child at heart, I think you're gonna love this movie. It really packs an emotional wallop by the end, and I was really touched by it. So I will say Marvelous and the Black Hole is very good. Lastly is the anime film Pompo the Cinephile, which was just released exclusively in theaters last week for 2 days only and should be arriving on streaming soon. This was released by G Kids, a studio that I adore. They just came out with Belle at the beginning of the year, which is still one of my favorite films of the year so far. And this is about another movie about the behind the scenes of making a movie. So I was really looking forward to this. Unfortunately, I was really let down. You can check out my full review of the film on my channel, so I won't go too much into it. But the animation here is breathtaking, and I really did enjoy the scenes of them filming their movie. But I had a lot of issues with the messaging behind Pompo the Cinephile. One of our lead protagonists, we have our filmmaker Gene. And then we have the titular Pompo, who is the producer of this film that's being made. And she has all of these really just annoying opinions, I guess you could say, about film and how movies should be, how they should all be under 90 minutes, and how you have to have a beautiful woman in your lead role for your film to be successful. You have to have sex appeal, and you have to have gone through these terrible, horrible circumstances in your life to be a successful filmmaker or to be a creative genius. And she has all of these ideas, which are fine, but the movie runs with all of these opinions as fact. And then it goes even deeper into them and goes into these ideas of that our lead character had dropped his family and dropped his friends and given up a social life and given up all of these things in his life so he can be a filmmaker. And I just, it rubbed me the wrong way, and it made me feel, it almost took the whimsy and the magic of the filmmaking process out of it all and just made it this ugly thing. So it didn't sit right with me, unfortunately. So once again, if you are interested in Pompo the Cinephile, please do check out my review for more of my in-depth thoughts. But because of the messaging, I have a hard time recommending it. But the animation is beautiful, and there are some really interesting good scenes within the film. So I will say Pompo the Cinephile is meh. Okay, so now that we're done talking about all 13 movies, let's move them around so we have our definitive top 3 of the month and our bottom 3. All the way at the very bottom, we have We're All Going to the World's Fair. Now, I know this is going to be divisive. I know people are loving this movie, but I'm going to stick to my opinion, and I hate this movie. But I am not saying do not see this film, because there is such an outpouring of love for it. I'm not going to tell you to not see it. This is just my opinion, and I am curious to hear your thoughts on it. So I'll stick to worst of the worst, but once again, check it out for yourself. Moving on to the very bad tier, I would say neither of these movies are worth seeing, so that might be saying something. But Choose or Die stays at the bottom. I think this is just a totally uninspired, bad horror movie. I just don't see it. Don't watch it. It's not worth it. And I will leave the bubble up at the top of the very bad tier just because I guess you could say I got a couple of chuckles out of it. But that's it. Moving on to the meh tier, I'm going to also keep that the same because Pompo the Cinephile, I can't get over the messaging, whereas I did have a good enough time with Fantastic Beasts. It just could have been so much better, and where is the damn magic? So that's going to stay at the top of the meh tier. Moving on to just okay. Wow, I'm not moving anything around yet. I'm going to keep White Hot at the bottom because I just don't think it reached its potential as a documentary. It really should have been a limited series to really delve deep into all of its ideas and its plot threads. But it's still worth checking out, I would say. And Ambulance, it's stupid, ridiculous popcorn entertainment. If you love action movies, you're gonna love this movie. It's still just okay, but at the top of that tier. Moving on to Very Good. Whew. I really, really like all of these movies, so this one's gonna be really hard. I'm gonna move The Bad Guys, and I'm shocked I'm saying this, but The Bad Guys is going to the top of the Very Good tier. I'm so pleased DreamWorks Animation is finally getting it together, and they created something really special with The Bad Guys. And then next, I'm going to keep Midnight there. I think this is just a white-knuckled, bare-bones horror thriller that will keep you on the edge of your seat. I love South Korean horror movies, and this is another really good one. Then I'm going to move Marvelous and the Black Hole above The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. I think Marvelous and the Black Hole is a touching, powerful very sweet coming of age tale. I know not a lot of people have heard about it, but you've heard about it now, so go check it out. And then at the very bottom of that tier is going to be The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. Total blast. I love the chemistry between Nick Cage and Pedro Pascal, but there were some issues holding it back for me, so that will be at the bottom of the very good tier. Then we have in the amazing tier by itself Apollo 10½, which is such an incredible film. I cannot wait for more people to check this out, and it really will give you just this blast of nostalgia, and it's beautiful to look at. And then last but not least, in the masterpiece tier, we have Everything Everywhere All at Once. Stop what you're doing right now, turn this video off, and go see that film. It is incredible. So our top 3 movies of April 2022 are Everything Everywhere All at Once, Apollo 10½, and The Bad Guys. And the bottom 3 movies of the month are We're All Going to the World's Fair, Choose or Die, and The Bubble. Thank you so much for watching Lost in the Reel and my ranking of April 2022. I would love to hear your thoughts on all of these films. What were your favorites and least favorites of the month? Let's hash it out in the comment section down below. And until next time, my friends, take care.